Hey there, it's Dave from Telescribe and Nothing Gain, and with me today is, of course, Andy Edwards from The Manic Rain and Kirk Houghton from Screen Blast Repeat, and you're watching the A.D.K. Rock and Metal channel. So in today's video, we're back doing some more retrospective reviews of albums, whether they're classic albums or historic albums or maybe breakthrough albums, or just because they hit the exact timeline that we're looking at, which is this particular point of view is 1995. So we're going back 30 years. The album in discussion for today is Anathema, and the album is called Silent Enigma. I don't know anything really about this band before we started obviously reviewing it. So to take us through a little bit more background on it, I'm going to pass over to Kirk.
Nowadays, Anathema are one of those esteemed non-metal bands loved by metal fans who appreciate music with an emotional depth and darkness outside of an aggressive paradigm. Thanks to albums like Alternative 4, Judgment, and A Fine Day to Exit, they can take their place next to The Cure, Radiohead and Depeche Mode as artists that metal bands cite as an inspiration. Yet there are two exceptions here. Anathema did not experience multi-platinum success, and they were a genuine metal outfit before they transitioned into the melancholic prog rock group we know today. Those that discovered the band on 2012's Weather Systems might be shocked to learn that the Liverpudlians were once a gothic metalite. Indeed, their 1995 sophomore album, The Silent Enigma, is a classic of its genre and represents a high point for the British gothic metal scene, coming out in the same year as Draconian Times by Paradise Lost and The Angel and the Dark River by My Dying Bride. It earned them a place in the club known as the Peaceful Three, in recognition that all three artists released their early albums on the legendary metal label from West Yorkshire. Though it did not experience the same commercial triumph as Paradise Lost, or achieve the same level of influence as My Dying Bride on the wider death doom scene at the time, there's no doubt that The Silent Enigma is now one of the seminal records of this era in British metal. It also represents a turning point for the band, as the first record to feature Vincent Cavanagh on lead vocals and also a greater emphasis on melody. Modern artists such as Grey Skies Fallen, Tomorrow's Rain and Dialogia cite this record as an inspiration, and metal fans have not forgotten how much they contributed to the evolution of gothic metal and death doom in the early days of both movements before moving on to new pastures.
Okay, Kirk, now you've given us a bit of background. You can set out the stall of how we're going to approach it for today's review.
We're going to start with you then, because you don't really know much about Anathema. I think the only thing you know is that they used to be maybe a death doom metal band. Am I right in thinking that, Dave?
I didn't even know that.
Okay, good start. Okay, no, it is, because this is interesting for later on. So we've presented you with this classic 1995 album. When I say we, because Andy and I are big fans of gothic metal and death doom. So we want to know what you thought. Were there at least 2 or 3 songs that stood out for you on this record?
Okay, so before I tell you about the songs that stood out for me, so if I talk about the band Anathema, it's a band I've known the name of, but it always I didn't know what type of band it was, so it never pulled me in any direction whatsoever. So I was like, is it gothic? Is it doom? Is it death metal? I just didn't really know. Whereas certain other bands I instinctively were like, yeah, I know what that band's about. I can approach it. So it was always one of these bands I was like, at some point, if someone plays me something, I'll listen to it, or I'm not going to go out my way to go and check it out. So, but I knew they'd been around for a long time, so it was interesting coming to this, and having the fact that you guys had recommended it for this week's album review made me go, okay, I kind of have a vague idea it was going to be either doom or death, or a combination of those two. Basically is where I figured it was going to go. So as far as songs that there were 3, I'm going to say A Dying Wish. I really liked how the guitar and the bass tone really complement each other, which I don't find on some of the other songs. On that particular song, the instrumentation actually complements really, really well. When the drums and the heavier guitars sort of come in, it sounded to me like a bit of a low-tuned Iron Maiden. was kind of the vibe I was getting. So I was like, okay, you're getting kind of almost a bit of a classic metal vibe going in on this point. Again, good guttural vocal mix on this particular song, but it's a little bit all over the place, and vocals was probably the weakest element on this album for me as a whole. It just was a little bit all over the place. I did like the midsection parts on this song with the bass and the drums. I thought they were really cool. Great build up back into the track. I thought that worked. The other songs, there were two. Alone, I really liked it as an instrumental piece. It was a great palette cleanser on the album. Very theatrical, very menacing in its tone, whilst also being kind of quite pretty. And it was an interesting track. It wasn't sort of one thing or another. And Sunset of Age. Really like the interesting mix of heavy guitar distortion, but also the clean guitar, the gothic layered vocals, great lead guitar melody, and it suited the song really, really well. Kind of reminded me a little bit of, I guess there was elements of, for me, things like Paradise Lost vibes were coming through at this point. It was Doom, but it has a natural groove to this song as well, so it wasn't just kind of classic Doom in my head. And I think going back into a clean on the middle section of that song really helped reset the song for the big heavy vocals and guitars coming back in. It was really intense, but it's also repetitive, but in a good way, I thought. But they were the only ones that really kind of stood out for me on this album.
Andy, this is the last album in which Anathema are a clear metal band. So which songs stand out would you recommend to somebody who wants to get into this band and is not aware that they were once a major underground extreme metal concern?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw on your screen, but I got kicked out the link there and missed what Dave said was his first featured song. Just remind me of that.
Dying Wish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for me, this is a band that I got into in the sort of early days of the band, even before this album, the Crestfallen EP, and I think I picked up a few sort of 7 inches that they did before that. But real fan of this band at this stage of their career. I've tried to sort of follow them as they've matured as songwriters and musicians, but it's a long journey, and it's the most recent material is a world away from this, as you mentioned, Kirk. But for me, favourite track is the opener and Restless Oblivion by a long shot. That is often on repeat for me. It's on my sort of Spotify favourite tracks. I often go to it as a song, so I absolutely love the track. It's a really beautiful intro to the song. All the instruments are there, and then it sort of comes down with the real crush and doom that Anathema were famous for, along with other peaceful bands at the time. They had this trademark sort of guitar structure whereby one guitar plays the riff and hangs onto that last note, and then the second one joins in and repeats that same riff. And I heard that on They Die from the Serenades album. It's got one of the best choruses ever, I think. A bleak garden to cry, where my Amorato died. I mean, that's repeated a lot, but it's so powerful and it's delivered so well. And I really like the haunting monologue at 4 minutes as well. It's a really, really strong song and a great opener to the album. The others, do you remember when we spoke about Paradise Lost, Draconian Times? And when we sort of sat down, or when I sat down and reviewed it, I said the tracks on the second half of the album towards the end were almost unknown, unfamiliar. Kind of the same for this, and I still don't know why. Maybe because the first 4 or 5 songs are so strong. I don't know why I didn't sort of listen to or remember the latter half of the album, which gives a clue to the answer to one of the questions and talking points we'll do later. But my other favourite tracks are Sunset of Age. Did you mention that, Dave?
Yeah, standout song.
Yeah. Again, it's got great layers of guitar, very doomy riffs with a mix of clean sections, and Nocturnal Emission as well is my other one. It's a bit of an unsavoury title. It does kind of refer to what you think it relates to. Some guitar sort of single note riffs, and there's a passage of instrumentation that sort of replicates heavy breathing, which is kind of the theme of the song. So they're my 3.
Yeah, I'll pick up on Nocturnal Emission, track number 5 on side B. I'm surprised that got mentioned. It's definitely the most aggrieved song on the album, and it approaches the Sisters of Mercy in a unique way by avoiding a regular drum beat for the entirety of its existence, which alone is very strange. They employ the classic goth metal techniques of using divergent guitars, which you've mentioned, and the one playing the doom riffs, the other embroidering it with like clean guitar arpeggios, which appear in every song and is a defining feature of their sound. And I like how they build to a climax in the chorus, and you're right about that female scream and the heavy breathing. It's really unsettling, but I think it's probably the one song on the album where critics would be right to say there's no clear direction to this song, you know, to some of these tracks. I think this is the one that's guilty of that. Track number 1 is a masterpiece, Restless Oblivion, favorite to this day, and they were even playing this in the 2000s, you know, when they've moved away from metal, because they recognize the genius of this song. You only need to hear the opening guitar strokes to see how Anathema differ from the rest of the Death Doom pack. They're not even a Death Doom band. This is so advanced when it comes to melody. The chords, I'm going to say it, are gorgeous in the intro to this song. Sorrowful as well, and you receive even more beauty in the shroud of those sorrowful keyboards. So what an intro. As soon as the first time I heard this was 2001, put this on, and that just blew me away, the opening 20 seconds. And it takes a minute before we hear the guitar distortion. It's a weighty morass of doom chords backed by the gargle of a thick bass guitar, which is so loud in the mix and so heavy. And you know we're in metal territory when Vincent Cavanagh growls the words, "Come on," at 1 minute 40. And the thing is with his voice, this is his first album as the lead vocalist, and this is the only one where he sings with a growl, you know, with that grisly death metal voice, and sometimes belting at full projection. But I think he does a great job considering he's only taken the microphone on this album. But the good thing with this as well, they surprise the listener with a switch to high register guitar melodies while the bass carries everything. You've even got like a Celtic Frost, Tom G. Warrior, in there as well, haven't you, after the first chorus? So they're very clearly a metal band at this time, proud of it as well. And though the amps are operating at maximum overdrive on track 1, the music's quite uplifting as a tension release. And you're right, Andy, that chorus, "A bleak garden to cry when my innamorato died." I did actually look up what is an innamorato, isn't it? Yeah, even though I've been singing it for years, it's like I actually need to know what this means.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is, I think you do hear the first signs of prog creeping into this song as well, which we know becomes a big part of their sound as well. So unbelievable intro to this album. Dave, I agree with you. Track number 4, Sunset of the Age, and Andy, you mentioned it. Nobody in Death Doom has this advanced level of melody. Again, the clean guitar phrasing in the intro, breathtaking in its beauty. And then listen how they contrast that with the finest riff of the album. It doesn't even feel like doom metal, despite it being so oppressive and slow in its torturous delight. The use of multi-harmony vocals in the verse parts, very imaginative, not least how they alternate between choral singing and spoken word. Again, they're already an outlier at this stage of their career, and in some ways you kind of regret they didn't continue this on future albums, because they're really onto something new. Harmonizing guitar shapes in here as well, just as poignant in the way they communicate the mood of sorrowful solitude. And I think really fans of Cult of Luna are more likely to enjoy this than fans of Cathedral. I love how they stitch together finger-picking chords and the inevitable slow down at 3-minute mark. On closer analysis though, they've turned the main riff into a melodic passage of folk guitar, so you can see how they built the former. That's really impressive. And guitar solos are a succession of dazzling riffs. They're just the furthest things from their mind on this album. It's about atmosphere. You know, it's about beauty, but also darkness. It's a gothic album, isn't it? So yeah, I agree. I think it was inevitable we were going to pick the same songs. I will just quickly mention track number 8, A Dying Wish. I think it's the one epic song of side B. It's like side B is anchored around that 8 minutes, 12 seconds. And they use the first 2 minutes to just reveal how they've built the main riff. They actually play it in acoustic form, and then they break it down into longer and more intimate settings. It's clear that they want this to be the monumental song of the album, not just side B with its galloping thunder, heavy heart vocals, and the slower sections as well. But the true climax arrives at the 4-minute mark when they use the drums to cease with a regular beat, instead accenting the main riffs. You go dun 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 dun. Fantastic use of dynamics. And then yep, Dave, one more thing I'll say, agree, they like insert this Pink Floyd bass line in there, but really heavy on the plectrum, which makes it sound almost like post-punk, like Joy Division. Did not see that come in, and it gets me every time. So, yeah, there's a lot to pick apart here, isn't there? I think the next thing that we do need to move on to then is we've talked about our 2 or 3 favorite songs, and then Andy, we'll start with you. What are the high points of this album?
I think the overall songwriting and musicianship. I mean, you can see how this band have matured and sort of the stepping stones they've made from I think it was called They Died 7-inch, to the Crestfallen EP, to the Serenades album with Darren White on vocals, to this, where you mentioned the progression and the prog elements. You mentioned Pink Floyd as well, which is a huge influence on the band. There's a cover on the next album, Eternity, for example. I'm sure they've done others in their career as well. So Pink Floyd are obviously an influence on the Kavanagh brothers and chief songwriter Duncan Patson, who plays the bass. And talking the vocals, I think Vincent Kavanagh does a really, really great job. He's got the death growls on some of the tracks, like Rest of Oblivion and Dying Wish, but he's got the spoken word, he's got the clean, and he's everything in between as well. There's so many different layers to his vocals. I'm not sure how much he uses that in later recordings, because I've tried to get into the sort of later Anathema albums. I've got some of them, but I'm not really giving them the play time that they deserve. So as my sort of musical enjoyment matures, I'm trying to follow this band as well as they've matured through their career. But yeah, it's just a really, really good album. They're the elements that I think are the high points.
What about the low points? Are there any on this for you? Because I mean, we see this as a classic album, don't we?
There's not many. I think I'd have arranged the tracks slightly differently. I mean, we'll come on to that later when we talk about the closing and the end tracks, for example. I think Alone is a bit of a weak point. They often, on the previous recordings, there was a track called I can't even read my own writing now, which features a female vocalist and an acoustic sort of guitar accompanying. Everwake, that's it, I can read it now. But better than that on the Serenades album is J'ai fait une promesse, which is again the same sort of format, but much better than this particular track. So they know what they can do it, in my opinion. Palette cleanser, as Dave referred to it as. Acoustic guitar, clean guitars with female vocals on the Serenades track, sung in French, for example. But that one doesn't match those two that they've attempted on previous recordings. I'd say that's only sort of low point.
So I think that's why it's important to get Dave's opinion, because you're not invested in this album. It's not your type of music. So I'm curious, what are the high points of this album, Dave?
Okay. High point. Yeah, so I have no history with this album. So this is me coming in it from 30 years on, and looking back at it, knowing what I know about song production, where albums and music has gone on to. So for me, the high points of the album is the overall songwriting of where they are approaching the song. So what they're trying to do with specifically the fact they're using this really nice clean tone, but they're still throwing heavy distortion guitars, and they've got this interesting bass tone that's not distorted bass heavy. So it's a much cleaner tone, which you would kind of almost go, that clean bass tone would be more inclined with an alternative metal band rather than doom. The clean, we talk about like let's say Paradise Lost, they use clean guitars, but they use them as an intro and then launch into heavy guitars. They don't tend to keep the clean guitar at the same time as the heavy. So I think that's a very interesting element into their writing. I was not blown away by the vocals. But what frustrated me listening to, so it was interesting when we talked about Restless Oblivion, because the vocals, when they kicked in, were so upfront in the mix. I'm like, why are your vocals so fucking loud? You're so much more present than everything else. And it's almost like they're like, he goes, I'm going to do the vocals, but I want no effects or detailed EQing. So if I blast it out, suddenly your vocals are spiking. The problem is when your vocals are that loud and not sat in the mix well, you can hear every imperfection. And I started hearing it going, yeah, that didn't sound great, that little bit there. I would have wanted another take. I would have wanted it to sit. If that was sitting in the mix, I wouldn't have noticed it at all. But I'm hearing little bits. And so I was sitting there going for it, going, there are some nice vocal chops in there. But if it was sitting in the mix better, I would have enjoyed the song. To the point where, what song was it? Oh, yes, The Silent Enigma. I couldn't finish the song. It got so awful. The vocals were so awful, it instantly put me off. As soon as he kicked in, I'm like, nah, fuck that. I'm not listening to this anymore. This is shit. This is awful. And that's one of my things. I just couldn't do it. I was like, this is not great. But there were points where his vocals were really good and they suited the song really well. Like on A Dying Wish and Sunset of Age, I thought they worked really, really well in those sort of tracks. There's also elements on the second track on the album where it almost sounds like a raw live recording. So there's something about the production of this album that just doesn't stack up. Now, you could say, well, hang on, it's 1995. Draconian Times came out in 1995 and blows the production of this out of the fucking water. Now, you could say, well, hang on, but this is more Death Doom, whereas they're Doom and they're doing a different thing. And yes, they are very different styles of music, but I'm looking at it from that point of view because I'm not invested at the time when this came out. I have got no memory of this. And in my back of my head, when we did Draconian Times, I had that memory of my time of it. And it took me a while to kind of sit back and go, hang on, I've got to listen to this now, actually in this modern time. And actually, this album isn't as good as I thought it was. Because every time someone said, and what was the album? Was it Once? What's the one that comes after it?
1 second. Yeah.
I listened to 1 second afterwards because you guys, I think that's a better album. And it is. 1 second is a much better album than Draconian Times. But I never thought that because in my head, I'm like 1995 when I heard Draconian Times. This was a brilliant album.
It was the commercial peak, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As well?
So, and I'm like that with this album. I'm listening to it going, I can see where the band's going. I can see what they're trying to do. If this had a much better production on this, I think this would have been a really good album for me. But all I'm hearing is production bits that I'm like, oh, that bass tone there isn't quite sitting with what's going on there. Or the only thing that was really well produced was the drums sounded great on the whole album and the heavy guitars sounded really great. Everything else just felt like it was all a little bit not quite leveled out. They hadn't quite sat down. And I think if they'd done more in the work of the mixing and the overall production at that point of stage, I would have probably enjoyed this album a lot more. But they're my low points. But I think the songwriting is very good. Yeah,
The Silent Enigma, I looking back at my notes, I think is a bit of a low point as well. For a title track, it's very disappointing. You said you couldn't finish it, David. I don't think it's a very long track at all. It's only about 3 minutes, but it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. It does build up. It hasn't got enough elements to make it what you'd think would be one of the stronger tracks on the album, being the title track. You know, there's some anger and rage in there in the vocals, but it's one I'd probably skip as well.
Same as like Cerulean Twilight. It builds and it just anti-climaxes. There's just nothing to it. At the end of it, you're building, and that's what Silent Enigma did. It builds and you think, okay, this is going to be cool here, and then, that's a bit shit. Okay. That's a bit...
But that's a real good example of there's a good 3 minute song in there, because the last 3 minutes of that is just repetitive and, could easily have been cut out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pick up on both those points. The Silent Enigma, track 7, it doesn't stand out at all, really, does it? Solitude and introspection are the two dominant themes of this music, and if you listen to it, they actually just rework the opening motif from Restless Oblivion, don't they, into this song, and it's like Celtic Frost, but with better musicianship to align with the fertile imagination of its creators. But there's never a constant presence for the drums in the mix, which is so unusual for a metal band. There's at least 3 songs in here where the drums, the furthest thing from the mind is to actually lay down a regular beat, which it's imaginative, but doesn't always work. You're right about track number 2, Shroud of Frost. Now this, actually, do you know what I find interesting about this? Listen to it in 2025. This came out today. It would be called post-metal straight away, because you've got the experimentation, you've got the heavenly keyboards, and he is shouting into the microphone, like Neurosis and Cult of Luna and these bands.
It's like doom jazz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but the thing is, then they're very happy, aren't they, to present it in a gothic aesthetic, which is just fascinating. So really original song list, and Andy, how many times was you have played it at that point goes, help me to escape from this existence, I yearn for an answer, can you help me? And he is blood and guts just thundering that. It's like he wants to lose his voice. So it's very much in your face there, you know, frothing at the mouth. Pain, it's not rage, it's pain, isn't it? Writhing agony. So I really enjoy that. To me, the high points of the album, it's a long album, isn't it? But it's an easy album to absorb when you're out walking in the countryside. The long form songs are not a problem at all because this music's so immersive. You know, it's ideal if you're walking through a forest in winter or autumn and you've got a public bridle way ahead and 5 miles and you're not going to see anybody. This is the type of music you want to be listening to. And I like how the structure of the album, there's 4 songs that this album is anchored around. Track number 1, track number 1, 2, 3, and I would say 8, Dying Wish. Everything in between, it is a chapter or a short story, not a short story, almost like a poem. And they want you to have that album experience. This is not the type of thing you're going to put on a Spotify playlist on random. Because if it brings up number 3 alone, you'll be like, what the hell is this? Is this a metal band? You know, and same with the last song as well, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
You're like, what is this? Weaknesses, I just think there are a few moments in this where they really are trying to be Celtic Frost into the Pandemonium, which is clearly the biggest influence on here, because the first ever gothic metal song is track number 2 on Celtic Frost's 1987 album called Mesmerized. And Vincent Cavanagh is replicating Tom G. Warrior's vocals on that, which are not great to begin with from Tom G. Warrior. And I just think that it's a bit too blatant, but in no way does that tarnish the album. I mean, we've talked about the opening song, which we all seem to love. Closing song, Black Orchid. What do we think of this? It's only 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and it's a mood piece, isn't it? Dave, what did you think of the last song?
Again, instrumental track, just not needed at all. You could have easily finished it on a Dying Wish. You could have either taken parts of this and tagged it onto the end of a Dying Wish and made it as an outro to a Dying Wish, would have been absolutely fine. Or there's enough of this that this could have been made into a fully fledged song. There were the elements of there that could have had vocals and been built upon and turned into a full track. So it's a fucking waste and it's a disgrace to be put on an album.
Wow, harsh words. Andy, come on, give the counter argument.
Yeah, I quite like the track actually, but I think that should have been, although the intro to Restless Oblivion is amazing and we've all talked about that, Black Orchid could have easily been the intro to an album or the intro to the first opening track, and Dying Wish would have nicely bookended the album, because I think that's got a very similar feel to Restless Oblivion. You know, they kind of sit well as either end of the album, but Black Orchid just seems like a strange, you know, it seems a strange place to plonk that right at the end of the album to close it. And as Dave said, it's got all the elements. I mean, it's got like almost an orchestral breakdown, which sort of reminds me of the sort of closing track that Paradise Lost put on Icon. Is it Duez Miserata or something like that? You know, that's a similar sort of feel to that closing instrument with, you know, big orchestral sort of themes going on. But yeah, it's a good song, good piece of music, but it's in the wrong place on the album.
Yeah, it's the one song that makes you realise they're part of the Peaceful Three. Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Anathema, they really do define Peaceful Records, don't they? And UK Death Doom or English Death Doom and Gothic Metal in the 90s. And I would say it's probably the only song comparable to something that you'd expect to find on Paradise Lost's 1991 album Gothic, the symphonic elements. It's quite evil sounding, isn't it? Which is probably not really in line with the rest of the mood of the album, I would say. It's a bit of a strange song. Dave's right to say it feels like they've just added it on and they want to end it on a somber note, but you've got this like imperious militaristic element to it, which is just not found anywhere else on the record. I think they should have probably saved this for, yeah, like you said, it could have been the intro. Probably been better off as the intro, Andy. Dying Wish would have been the great way to end the album, wouldn't it? So I think it is worth asking the two things, musicianship and production. Dave, we know you don't like the production, although you like the drums and the guitar tone. What about the musicianship on this?
Yeah, I think I did say that in the highs. I thought the actual songwriting and musicianship was very good. So yeah, I thought good musicianship, but my thoughts on the production.
Yeah, Andy, because you know how this band evolved. What do you think about the musicianship at this stage of their career?
Yeah, I think it's a very high standard, and I'd say it's the building blocks for Eternity and Alternative 4 and all the albums that followed. It's only really when I sort of sat down with headphones and sort of made my notes, I could hear how prominent the bass is. And you reminded me, Dave, it's a clean tone bass. I think it really does add to the songs. And that's probably because Duncan Patterson is one of the chief songwriters. He's thought, well, I want my bass parts in there. He's not just following the guitars. He's playing his own melodies. And they really do add to the songs. And I'll echo again what I said about Vincent Cavanagh's vocals. When you look back at the preceding releases from Anathema, the vocals are so much better. Darren White, his death doom, his growling death deliveries were okay, but when he was asked to, perhaps have a bit more melody, especially on the Pentecost 3 EP, you can hear where they'd want the vocalist to sing, and he's just doing spoken word. And you can hear on this album where they would have asked Darren White to sort of done the clean vocals and the actual singing, where he would have struggled. And Vincent Cavanagh nails it, I think, in my opinion. He's got so many different ways of delivering the lyrics, from sort of spoken word. He even varies the spoken word deliveries to the clean and the growls as well. So great musicianship and great vocals.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at the spectrum of heavy metal. I would say death doom and gothic metal are quite low on the bar when it comes to musicianship. You don't need to be a virtuoso to play this music. Whereas if you're playing death metal that's influenced by Chuck Schuldiner and death, or even thrash, which is very technical, especially the stuff from Voivod and bands like that, that really is like university level, isn't it? But I think this is all about emotion, like post-metal, isn't it? And that's why I love this music. I wouldn't call this a straight death doom album. It's like progressive death doom with gothic elements, Sisters of Mercy coming in there, and then also folk passages. So I think the strongest musicianship is the clean guitar, the finger picking passages, which you do need a lot of concentration when you're doing that to get that beautiful resonance. The drummer, very dramatic, isn't it? Again, he just doesn't lay down a regular beat as much as you'd expect. And I think that works in their favor. It distinguishes them already at this point in their career as one of the big three, the peaceful three. Vocals, he's still finding his voice, isn't he? I think he's very successful of just shouting into the microphone, which now would get a lot of praise. It'd be seen as like a authentic post-metal hysterical experience. At the time, it was probably seen as a transition point, wasn't it? But yeah, bassist Duncan Patterson, he's the main beneficiary of the music because the bass is just omnipresent, isn't it? Whenever they go into distortion, as you said, Dave, he's playing clean, but with that plectrum, my God, it's like gargling, isn't it? It's like a molten lava, about to explode. So fantastic bass tone. The next one we always address after we've talked about production, I would just say production, they leave the rough elements in the mix and let the bass carry the low end. I like that. The cymbal strikes are epic throughout the record, and the guitar tone rough but grandiose. But side A or side B, or should I rephrase the question, Dave? Is it possible to make a case that side B is the better of the two for this record?
Just no. It's impossible. There is one good song in the last 5 tracks. That's it. There's literally a Dying Wish. You can't. Black Orchid's not good. The Silent Enigma's not good. Cerulean Twilight's not good. I felt Nocturnal Emission was just a bit of a plodder song. It didn't really go anywhere. So after that, really, you've only got Sunset of Age, I Liked Alone, although it wasn't one of Andy's favourites, Shroud of Frost, and Restless Oblivion, which is your first 4 tracks. So you're kind of going out of 5 possible good tracks on the album for me. It's the first 4 and number 8. So no, it's a forgotten half of the album. I don't think there's any redeeming quality on repeat listening in there. Just put the first half of the album on and just play repeat, and buy the single for a Dying Wish.
So an EP, basically. Do
an EP. There's a good EP in here somewhere.
We've heard that before. Andy, side B, is it that bad?
No, it's not that bad, but side A is significantly stronger. Yes, I like Dying Wish. I like Black Orchid. Cerulean Twilight has got its has got its positive points, but they kind of drag it out, as I said before. Just repeating the passage for the last 3 minutes of the song. Nocturnal Emission. One thing I didn't say about one of the reasons why I liked it is one of my stronger tracks. That sort of single note, almost clean guitar. You'll know the technique name, Kirk, but it's quite a simple little lick.
Yeah.
They put in the occasional note right at the beginning, sort of quick succession, just to sort of vary it up. And that's something I picked up on that, and which is one of the reasons why I like it. But yes, side A, because it's got that massive opening track and a couple of other bangers as well. Yeah, it's a theme, isn't it, for our reviews?
I think most albums,
in most cases,
end up that way, don't they? Yeah, side B is strong for me, but the main weakness is everything is geared towards A Dying Wish at track 8, isn't it? It just feels like they're trying to get the Cerulean Twilight. Yeah, I mean, again, it's almost aimless. It feels like they have no idea how it should evolve beyond the sorrowful narrative and occasional experiment with choral singing. And they seem to reset to ringing guitar chords and lighter dynamics when they need to transition away from the bubbling tension. I think that becomes a formula of this album, a very interesting one that no one else is doing, but you can already pick out why they're doing it. But I think there's no doubt this album, even side B, can be enlightening and immersive if you let the music take over your mind and stop over-analyzing their intentions. But unfortunately, that's our job as music reviewers, isn't it? We are going to analyze things in micro detail. But what I'm trying to say there is, again, I keep using this analogy. Go for a long walk in the countryside, pop this album on, there'll be very few flaws. It is immersive. You can just let it sink into you. But yeah, side A is the strongest. There's 3 classics of the fans of Anathema's metal era are always going to cite: Restless Oblivion, Shroud of Frost, Sunset of the Age. These are phenomenal songs. I do like track number 3, Alone. Good point to put that as a palate cleanser, because the first 2 are really long songs, let's not forget. It reminds me of Swans. It's like how they used to break up an intense album with an interlude of like delicate porcelain guitars. So yeah, I do actually like that. But side A for me is clearly the better part of the record. So we've done that. We've talked about which is our favorite, side A or side B. And we normally ask the question, has the album stood the test of time? Which can also mean, what is your overall verdict, whether it's from 2025 or putting yourself in the shoes of someone from 1995 who's heard this music and can't categorize it. So we score it out of 10. Dave, I might say, no, we will. Let's put you in the middle. Andy, let's get a high score to start with, because he's going to drag the average down. Before you give us out of 10, what's your final verdict on this album after visiting it for maybe the first time in a few years?
It's not a revisit for me. I often play this one. It's that strong in my collection. I really, really do like it. It's a great album. It's not perfect, but if you're getting into Anathema later on in their career, in the sort of the progression, prog rock era that they're now in, and you want to sort of delve back into their career, you could go back as far as this and sort of see the stepping stones and the foundations of what that band would become. If you was to go back to Serenade or the Crestfallen EP, you'd be, this isn't the same band, and they are worlds apart. So is it the rating or just my overall view? I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, what was your overall score?
Overall score, yeah, it's not perfect. There are some sort of low points and sort of weaker tracks, but I'm going to go for a very respectable 8 out of 10.
Yeah. Over to you, Dave.
Okay, so if this album was put out today, I don't think it stands up for the production that is required. Songwriting, yes, the songwriting itself would stand up for today, but the overall production doesn't stand up. So that was where I would say, does it still stand up? No, because I don't think it from a production point of view. I know that people are going to go, yeah, but death metal is all about it's a bit more raw. Well, no, I'm going to argue that and say, well, actually, if you talk about death metal and stuff like that, you can go back and listen to stuff like Obituary, and it doesn't sound as raw and unproduced. There's better production. So I think production-wise, I'm going to go on about it again. It could be better, and so I don't think on production level alone it would stand up as a modern release. Overall score for me is a 5 out of 10.
Okay, then. I'm just going to work out the average.
Because you know what your score is.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it in your head, Kirk. I'm sure you can. Intelligent man like you.
Yeah. Okay. So, before I give you my score, I'll give you a thought. So, I actually, going into this, I thought I'm going to listen to the Silent Enigma and every album right up to 2001 to see how they've evolved.
Wow.
And I have realised that the 1998 album, Alternative 4, and the 1999 album Judgment are even better than the Silent Enigma, and they're not a metal band at this time. They're a rock band. A lot of heavy guitar distortion, but pianos. Vincent Kavanagh has recognised his voice and how to project it, and he's got his own style. It's very strong, and it can stand at an acoustic guitar or a piano. That's how strong it becomes. And I do like the album after this that you mentioned, Andy, Eternity. It's like part 2 of this, but it's not got doom metal. It's just got really heavy rock. No riffs, just really heavy distortion, a lot of noise, feedback, a lot of beauty as well. Some spoken poetry in there, and there's a great song on it, which you know, Andy, called Far Away on the album after this, which is an absolute classic. And if you, I'd urge anyone, actually, go and listen to the album after this, Far Away, and then listen to the acoustic version as well. Then you'll understand the genius of that song. So, I still think this album came out in 1995 at the time, was unlike anything else happening in death doom or gothic metal. Its influence is still colossal to this day. I know bands that cite this as an influence. You'll see in the intro video, Tomorrow's Rain, Dialogia, bands like that, that they are adamant that this is like a high point for metal in general, not just death doom or gothic metal. So I think this is as a metal album, this is a colossal record. So it's a clear 8 out of 10, which Dave knew I was going to say. For me, doesn't quite make a 9, just because there are 1 or 2 moments where it does rip off Celtic Frost, and then there's, I would say, at least 2 songs where they don't really know where they're going. Still create this wonderful immersive atmosphere, very dark and introspective, but doesn't quite deliver. And I think if they would go back, they would probably correct those points. So 8 from me, 8 from Dave. Sorry, 8 from Andy, 5 from you, Dave. What's the mean average?
7.
Yeah, so interesting one to do. Maybe we should do one of the later albums, Dave. I think you would really like Judgment, the 1999 album.
You can always add it to the list.
Or you can go further forward, Kirk, to the realms that I've not even heard.
Yeah, I mean, I did listen to the 2001 album, A Fine Day to Exit.
Did they do one in 2005?
They did one in 2003. It was the last album, The Optimist, and then they split up during COVID. But the 2001 album is very much like Radiohead's OK Computer, Porcupine Tree, bands like that, and it's the first time they've stripped out the gothic Sisters of Mercy elements. So it's a massive departure, even from Alternative 4, which is their first, rock album. But
we can put them back on the list after we do a few other bands. But I think that
yeah,
it was good. It was good to do it because it's a good split of decisions and different styles, and so I always appreciate actually checking these ones out. But let us know what you think if you're watching this at home. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please do like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on another video sometime very, very soon. Take care.